Hello, and thank you for joining this Idaho Environmental Forum, IEF, Special Edition Forum Short, and welcome to the IEF's first virtual Legislative Forum Week. I am Braden Jensen, an IEF board member. Today I'm joined by Paul Arrington, the Executive Director for the Idaho Water Users Association, Justin Hayes, the Executive Director for the Idaho Conservation League, and Sam Eaton, the Director of Policy for the Governor's Office. Today we will be discussing the Governor's Salmon Workgroup and its recommendations to aid in salmon recovery in the region and state. The Idaho Environmental Forum is a nonprofit, nonpartisan educational association whose sole mission is to promote serious, cordial, and productive discourse on a broad range of environmental policies affecting Idaho. Because of the current COVID-19 health concerns and event restrictions, we cannot host our usual in-person legislative gala. However, we still want to bring you a thoughtful content on environmental policies being discussed at this time and during the legislative session. I'd like to thank our sponsors for making these events possible. You can find them on our website at Idaho Environmental Forum, all one word, .org. Again, thank you to our guests, and we look forward to the conversation today. And I guess I should just first of all clarify that both Justin and Paul, they served as members of the work group. There were more than 20 individuals serving on that work group. And Sam, we've invited on to give us a perspective from the Governor's Office, who will be receiving these recommendations. And we feel pretty fortunate to talk about these recommendations as it is that they just came off the press. They're still new, and people are still reviewing them. But I do want to lay a little bit of a background for our viewers. Back in April 2019, Governor Brad Little tasked his Office of Species Conservation with establishing a work group dedicated to addressing the salmon and steelhead issues. The purpose of this work group was to bring together a diverse set of stakeholders and to collaboratively develop unified policy recommendations that the governor could that would assist the governor as he shapes his Idaho's policy on salmon and steelhead recovery. So really looking forward to the conversation. And again, thank you to our guests. And I guess I'll just go ahead and lead off with a couple questions. Start with you, Paul, but Justin, feel free to jump in as well. Paul, what were the main objectives of the work group, and how did you see those come out and carry forward?
Well, I think, you know, from a high level, the main objectives are what you mentioned earlier about bringing together different people with different perspectives and different interests in the salmon and steelhead issues involving salmon and steelhead in Idaho, and having them work together to collaboratively find some solutions or some paths forward to help move the needle. We've said that phrase a lot during our process. How can we move the needle? At the end of the day, I thought we did a really good job of coming together. Many of the folks around the table previously had not been involved in collaborative efforts like this. And so to come together where, you know, in times past, maybe there was tension between our groups, and now we're sitting together around a table talking as friends, as colleagues, trying to find a path with a common goal of helping these fish to come back and trying to navigate our various interests. I thought it went well, and I thought we did a good job.
Well, thank you, Paul. And Justin, I'd be interested to know what you thought. I mean, was the work group able to accomplish those goals and those objectives?
I think the work group accomplished a lot. And one of our accomplishments, frankly, is recognizing that we didn't accomplish everything.
Right.
You know, you bring a diverse group of people representing different interests with different experiences together. And as Paul mentioned, many of us have been somewhat oppositional to each other over the years. And so there's sort of a hesitancy to let your guard down and talk earnestly about what you need and hear from others earnestly about what they need. I think that the work group did some really important things, though, and I'll just flag a couple of them real quick if I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think coming together and creating a common goal was significant, frankly. People have talked about restoring salmon in Idaho for a long time. They talk about the Endangered Species Act, but what does restoring salmon mean? Does it mean just fulfilling the minimum requirements of the Endangered Species Act, or does it mean more than that to the people of Idaho? And so I think one of the most significant accomplishments of the work group actually was to decide that our work group wanted to advocate for true abundance of salmon and steelhead in Idaho, meaningful numbers of fish that are important to the ecology of our state, but also important to the economy and the culture and the people of our state. That's a high bar, that's a big lift. And for this diverse group to decide that they want to take on a big task, that was a very important outcome. And I think that is an important thing for the people of Idaho to recognize that has just happened. And as we hand this off to the governor, I hope that the governor's office recognizes that we are, as a group, saying we have high expectations for what the state needs to try and accomplish on fish.
Well, thank you very much, and Justin. I do agree. A very diverse group and very difficult, and I think that is a huge accomplishment to coalesce behind a common goal like that. So thank you for that. And so I guess I'd like to go ahead and dive into some of the recommendations, some of the specific recommendations that is found in this report that was just released late December 2020. And so again, fresh off the press. And what was the work group able to coalesce behind? Maybe start with you, Paul, or
me? Okay, sure. I really want to emphasize what Justin said. At the end of the day, we found out coming to a common goal or setting that goal really wasn't a terribly difficult thing amongst folks around the table. We all have a similar vision and a similar goal and a similar desire for the future of salmon and steelhead. It's finding that path to get there where we tend to find points of disagreement. Before I, talk about a few of the high points, I think, on recommendations, I just want to emphasize something that, and we mentioned this in our report as well, that this was a first for Idaho, not just for many around the table, but for Idaho. A first time that such a diverse group of stakeholders got together, sat around a table, and collaborated on a shared vision for salmon and steelhead. And so there's a lot to be said about that. And as you look through our report, because this is the first time, you look through our report, there are a number of recommendations that reflect things that are already going on. There's a lot of great work being done throughout the state on habitat restoration and reconnection and things like that. There's a lot of great work being done in hatchery management and making sure that hatcheries can be a benefit to the system. There's a lot of great work being done in other areas. And so a number of our recommendations actually speak to these things and support them and express support for continuing those things. For example, habitat restoration and projects, we support those. We support continued efforts to work with landowners and continued efforts to work with agencies and the sort to continue having these projects and to continue allowing them to move forward and make the conditions better for salmon and steelhead. We do recognize in some cases, we're doing these things, but we can be doing them better. We can be doing them more efficiently. We can be doing them more effectively. Again, things like habitat, and it's the one that's on my screen, so I was thinking of that the most, but that's an example of an area where, we're doing great things, but there are probably more we could do, and we could probably do some things more effectively and more efficiently. So I'll stop there and let Justin talk, and maybe I'll have a few more thoughts, but.
Thank you. And go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I think one of the other most interesting things about how the work group progressed was as we learned about each other's needs and concerns, and we learned about what's killing Idaho fish and keeping us from being able to restore them, we all had to take a pretty big view of the things that we can do locally, and also the things that are regional questions that need regional resolution. And so when you look through these recommendations, there are great things that Idaho can do more of in our state, and I look forward to being part of that. But there are also many things that we said, hey, these are regional discussions, these are downstream things, these are out of the ocean sorts of things. And the list of recommendations that we put together speaks to all four of the H's. So habitat, harvest, the hydro system, and hatcheries. And then we also talked about predation and ocean conditions. So it's pretty encompassing list of recommendations. But it's also pretty important to recognize that these are the recommendations that we could reach consensus on. So it's a list of things that we all agreed on. There's a whole bunch of things that we didn't find agreement on, that they're on the cutting room floor, if you will. We did talk about a lot of additional issues. And as we presented this list of consensus things, we said, these are really great things. We think that they should go forward. We think that these will help fish, but we also are not trying to represent this as an all-encompassing restoration plan. Like, implementing our recommendations doesn't equal achieving our goals at this point, but it's a step in the right direction. And it moves us away from the status quo in the region. It moves us away from, well, I'll say the status quo again. When the governor launched this work group, he was quite emphatic that he did not see the status quo as working for Idahoans. And I think that the work group affirmed that, and we're trying to move off the status quo as well.
I'll just to that exact point. I mean, our last few sentences of the report are recognizing the good work, exactly what Justin said, the good work that was done by this group and the hard effort that was made to come to these recommendations. But then we recognize more conversations are necessary, more collaboration will be needed, and more work must be done. This is the first step for us, and more will be necessary as we move forward.
Well, certainly it appears to be a pretty significant one. And I guess to our viewers, for your information, you can find this report that, again, it was just released at the end of December on the Governor's Office of Species Conservation website. If you go to, I think I have that website right here, species.idaho.gov. If you type in the Governor's Salmon Workgroup, that webpage holds all of the information that the work group discussed, their agendas, all the different materials that were put together, and then you will also find at the top of that list these policy recommendations. And so thank you, Paul and Justin. And I do think your work and your service should be commended and noted. Certainly not a small task. And I guess we'll start transitioning over to Sam. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your perspective of what the work group, what they were able to accomplish, their efforts, and any thoughts you might have in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Braden. I mean, I had the joy of being able to watch most, if not all, of the work group sessions, but also didn't have to participate. And, watching the maturity of the group was pretty amazing. Given the topic that they were provided and the task they were given to try to accomplish in just 18 months was pretty daunting. In that first meeting, everybody's pretty well reserved. The room's pretty quiet. Unfortunately, COVID-19 kind of put a curveball in the process halfway through, because the first, you start with that first meeting being quiet, and then, by the end of the virtual meeting, just a few weeks ago, I mean, people are having conversations, they're asking about their family, asking about sports, and, just the maturity and the civility of the group and the progression was pretty amazing. And I think most, if not all, successful collaborative groups, that's just the natural maturation. It just takes time. And I think a lot of members would have liked, obviously, to have more time to continue working on it. But I think there's a lot of value in having a terminus and having an end date and having something to look forward to help move the process along. And specifically to Paul and Justin, and there were many, many more. All the work group participants were put on there for a reason, because of their ability to work collaboratively and to do the hard work. But Justin, with ICL and the resources he had, was a big help in putting together this report. It's as pretty as it is. Paul, with his legal experience and policy experience, was a big drafter of the report, and they both put in a lot of time and a lot of sweat into the report. So I appreciate their efforts, and it definitely wasn't unnoticed. And another point, I think some people, when we started this, we're just Idaho. This is such a regional issue. What's this group really going to accomplish? There was a lot of criticisms like, well, we're just going to, repaint over this white wall with white paint again, and what's going to be new. And I think when I started seeing this, these early drafts of all these recommendations, I mean, it felt like it was hundreds of recommendations. I couldn't believe that was the world that the work group had to work in. I mean, it was daunting on one aspect, because they had to go through all this, and not only did they have to come up with recommendations, but they had to get all the background information and knowledge to even to understand the issue, let alone put forth a recommendation. I don't know what the final tally was, but it's several dozen recommendations that come out of this. And the fact that this group in that short amount of time was to come up with these recommendations, and what Justin said is that these aren't all of them, but these are the ones that had consensus. I think that's pretty impressive and pretty amazing. And to use the phrase, I think it definitely is something that's going to move the needle.
Thank you very much, Sam. And what do you see are the next steps? I mean, moving forward, of course, I think that's an expected question. What's going to happen from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you're probably one of the first ones to print it off. I mean, we just got the report. Obviously, I've been involved and been paying close attention to the work group, so I have a strong understanding of what the recommendations are. Thanks to a lot of the state staff that spent a lot of time helping this work group get through the process and provide the technical expertise. I think myself and the governor are going to rely on those individuals and members of the work group to help move forward. I mean, right now there are recommendations for the governor. I'm hopeful that the governor can work through this and with my help and others' help, and we can turn around and say, yep, we support these recommendations. Hopefully we can support all of them. If not, it'll be most of them. And then that'll be the playbook, I think, that the governor uses and that the state staff uses and others in some of these regional dialogue, these regional fora that we're going to be moving into. Some may be aware that a few months ago, the governor, it's kind of a letter of intent, if you want to call it that, to enter into this regional dialogue with the other governors of Montana, Washington, and Oregon. And I think we're in a strong position based on this report. I mean, I know the other states haven't put anything together quite like this. There's been some task forces and other things, but this broad-based policy recommendations from a diverse group of stakeholders that the governor can use in these conversations, I don't think the other states have something quite like that. So that's going to position us pretty well in these conversations. And not only just regionally, but I think nationally. I mean, as there's conversations with Congress, and what the future holds in certain areas related to salmon, steelhead, and Idaho's rural economy. I think these are going to be helpful in those discussions as well.
I totally agree. Totally agree, and I think it should be, commended. The governor should be commended for the amount of resources dedicated towards this work group, the time and the interest, the insight. I think it's something that obviously, as Idahoans, we're interested in this topic. We'd like to see healthy fish runs, but also maintain some of those infrastructures and services that do exist. So certainly grateful for that. Again, Paul, Justin, and Sam, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Certainly all those hours and the study and the resources that it took to be part of the work group, again, should be commended and it certainly is appreciated. We thank you again also for your time to participate in this forum short. And we thank our viewers for joining us here for this IEF legislative week in a forum short format. And if any of our viewers have ideas for future forums, we'd love to hear them. And you can just email us at ief@idahoenvironmentalforum.org. If you'd like to be added to our member list, or if you'd like to help us out by becoming a sponsor, please visit our website at idahoenvironmentalforum, all one word, .org. And again, thank you to our current sponsors. We certainly could not do this without you. Join us again for our next forum short. And until then, stay safe and healthy. Thank you.